Hey everybody, in this video we're going to be talking about Stephen King's 2003 novel, The Dark Tower 5, Wolves of the Calla. We'll show you the points to look for when trying to identify first US and first UK trade hardcover editions, as well as provide a little historical context and thoughts on the work itself. The first U.S. trade hardcover edition was published by Grant with a big assist from Scribner, who I believe printed and distributed all 600 and some odd thousand copies of the print run for this. I want to clarify and say first trade edition. It was not the first edition worldwide. This was preceded by the artist and the signed limited edition. But this is the first edition that most people had the opportunity to buy. Most regular people could pick up in a store. It is commonly available now, and it is an important part of your Dark Tower collection. So I just want to clarify, this is the first trade hardcover edition. It was published by Grant, distributed by Scribner. It's the back cover image. Inside the dust jacket, look for a price of US $35. I have seen some copies of books 5, 6, and 7 of the Dark Tower series that have unpriced jackets. That would indicate some type of book club edition. So look for a price inside the jacket. And on the copyright page, a number line that includes the number 1 and the language first trade edition right there on the copyright page. Underneath the jacket, books 5, 6, and 7, for as common as they are in the first trade editions, they are nice looking books. So this has cloth all around, gold printing on the spine. Like the other Dark Tower books, it is illustrated. It is illustrated internally. The art, once again, is by Bernie Wrightson, which is a really cool touch. The nice illustrated end papers there. Yeah, so as common as these books are, books 5, 6, and 7, they are still very, very nice looking books. But this is the first U.S. trade hardcover edition of Wolves of the Calla.
And this is the British trade hardcover edition of Wolves of the Calla. It's got very cool red jacket artwork of the Dark Tower there. The price on the jacket is £25 UK. The inside of the book is the same as the Donald Grant Limited. It's got the same illustrated end papers and the same full color tip sheets. So the book matches the Donald Grant, except for the binding, which in this case is red cloth with silver foil stamping on the spine and Roman numeral 5 on the front for the 5th volume in the series. And that is, the back has young Stephen King working on the first Dark Tower story in college, and then older Stephen King at the time of publication of this book. So that is the British trade edition of Wolves of the Calla.
Forgive me, but I paraphrase Maya Angelou when it comes to the Dark Tower, books 5, 6, and 7. I don't remember quite what the books said or did, but I do remember how they made me feel. And when it comes to book 5, at least, I felt like it was a rip-roaring adventure. It reminded me a lot of spaghetti westerns, Seven Samurai, The Magnificent Seven, movies like that. This is the book where, spoiler alert, Father Callahan from Salem's Lot shows up again, which I really, really, really thought was cool. But I read these books when they first came out. So for Wolves of the Calla, that was 20 years ago. I desperately need to get back to the Dark Tower and reread the whole series, and I intend to. I really do. My specific memories of the novel are kind of vague and hazy, so I won't bore you and waste a bunch of your time going into a bunch of nitpicky types of things, because I mean, honestly, it's not that clear in my head. I do remember really enjoying Wolves of the Calla. I remember Song of Susanna as having myriad plot threads that were all kind of disconnected from each other, and there was just sort of this in-between feeling, trying to move the characters forward so that they could all be reunited, come together again for a rip-roaring finale in book 7. Stephen King, you know, this was his great work, his magnum opus, and he had taken several years between books. Previously, books 1 through 4 had, gosh, what, 15 years in between them? And then, of course, in 1999, Stephen King very nearly lost his life. And this channel and everything would be so much different. Pop culture would be so much different if Stephen King had died in 1999. But he didn't die, thankfully. He comes back and he gets healthy. And I think he realized the gravity of what happened, in that, you know, in an instant, he could have been robbed of his own chance to finish his masterpiece, his magnum opus. I mean, forget about robbing the world of the chance to read the stories. I think he writes them first and foremost for himself, and he almost missed out on that shot. So, you know, once he got some other projects squared away, he set about working on books 5, 6, and 7 pretty much back to back, as far as I understand. And after having taken years between the first 4 books, I believe that was an exhausting endeavor. It was certainly rather exhausting endeavor for me to read them back to back in 2003 and 2004. And I think book 7 kind of begins to betray a bit of that exhaustion, and of course has a famous ending, which I will not spoil, but which I was furious about at first, but have since come to realize that was amazing. Of course that was the ending. Similar to how I felt when I first watched the last episode of Seinfeld, if you recall. I felt very upset by that. But then in the years to follow, I began to recognize it as a brilliant move. And so it is with the Dark Tower series. But after a gap of, 6 years, Wolves of the Calla comes out. This was a big deal, big publicity, big promotional push. It's going to wrap up the series, and book 5 I remember very much enjoying, and I look forward to reading it again. And thanks as always to my friend and collaborator Noah for your help showing a first edition that I do not have in my own collection. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, this is the first US trade hardcover edition, and this artist edition actually precedes it and is the worldwide first edition. I believe the signed limited also gets considered as the first edition as well. But anyway, there will be another video about this and about the signed limited. But no matter how you slice it, we talk a lot about books, right? But books are just vessels to hold and present a story. And honestly, if the stories were no good, the books would be worthless. So it doesn't matter if you have the signed limited edition, if you have this artist signed edition, if you have this edition, if you have a paperback, a tattered paperback that you've carried around and you bought secondhand and you've read multiple times and it's falling apart, it doesn't matter. What matters is the story. What matters is how it makes you feel. But anyway, that's kind of drifting from the point of this channel, which is to talk about first editions. But I just wanted to try to bring it down to earth again for a minute and just let you know these are amazing stories. Stephen King is one of the greatest popular authors of the last 50 years, perhaps the greatest, most preeminent popular author of the last 50 years. And The Dark Tower is his masterpiece, his magnum opus, the sort of center on which his entire universe revolves. And books 5, 6, and 7 are a big part of that. I very much remember the excitement I felt when they were first announced. I remember the excitement I felt reading them, even though it was all a bit overwhelming in the end. And if you have not, for some reason, somehow, if you have not read the series, I highly recommend that you pick it up. Book 5 is definitely a highlight and definitely one of my favorites. But anyway, thank you as always for your time and for your support, and I will talk to you later. Bye.